Hi everyone, it's Alyssa here at the Township Library, and we are going to get started with our adult craft for the month of March, which is a really fun, easy beginner for me. I've done embroidery before, but maybe only once or twice before, years ago. So this is good for beginners. Beginner embroidery bookmark. It's one of these cute little corner bookmarks, and it has, this is poster board that you can get from any like CVS has it, the craft stores have it. Most places have this nice poster board. Maybe your kids have used it. We're using it for our own crafts. And felt, and it's this nice little corner bookmark, and so this kind of helps stabilize it a little bit, this backing. But all you need for this is you need a needle. So you do need a sharper needle, because even though this felt has a pretty easy weave to get through, we do need to poke a hole in our poster board, and it needs to have a nice wide eye here for our embroidery thread. You're going to get 3 colors of embroidery thread if you received a kit, that is, and everybody for the kit, they got different colors. Each one is different, so they're all totally random and varied. I tried to pick 3 colors that complement each other. You're going to receive your felt triangle, and so this makes 2. So we'll fold it over and cut it, you'll see, so that you can make 2. So you can do like I did a test one and I did a real one. And then you'll receive your square, your poster board square. So you receive 1 triangle that you can test it out on, practice your stitching, and then 1 that you'll use for your final bookmark. Other things that you may need, you'll see when I go and I do my blanket stitch on the edge. I did use a binder clip. You could use a paper clip to hold it in place, kind of the same way that if I were sewing, I would maybe use a needle to hold my pieces of fabric together. Another thing that is helpful is a thimble. I did not have any thimbles here with me at the library, so you'll see I kind of pushed to get through the poster board. I pushed my needle through the countertop here, but a thimble will be a lot nicer on your fingers. And if you need to sketch out with a pencil or chalk, tailor's chalk, you can do that. But otherwise, this is really pretty simple, and this is pretty relaxing once you get the hang of your stitches. There are some mess ups here, and it gets a little rough at first, but it is really fun and relaxing, and I had a really nice time making my bookmark, and I love my bookmark, so everyone gets to make a totally customized bookmark today, this month. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so to get started, there we go. We have the poster board, we have the felt. I'm folding my triangle over, and now I'm going to have 2. So I'm going to cut right in the middle. If you don't need to practice your stitches, great, you can have 2 corner bookmarks. I need to practice my stitches, so that's my practice piece. You'll see how it lines right up. So I'm going to take my embroidery thread, I'm going to tie a knot in the end. I like to do a double knot just in case. Then we're going to just pull through. I'm not doing a double like as if I were sewing for real. For embroidery, just the 1 is fine. So we're going to start. We're going to zoom in so we can get ready so you can see. We're going to start with our simple back stitch. So we bring the needle from the back to the front, and then as the name suggests, we kind of go back. Bring my needle from front to back and pull through, and then you have your first stitch. So now I'm going to, okay, how far do I want my stitch length to be? Poke my needle up from the back again. See, I've left the space for how long my stitch will be. And when we bring it up, we're going to poke the needle back down right where that first stitch ends, right into the same hole as what we're aiming for. And bring it back down, and that's our second stitch. So that's the back stitch. You remember it because you go back. You're creating these little backwards loops. So again, from back to front, pull my thread through, and then bring my needle in from front to back, right in the hole where that last stitch was. So next we're going to do a French knot. You can see I did an unsuccessful practice French knot. They're not the easiest to do, but they are quite fun. I'm bringing my needle again from back to front and pulling it through. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap our embroidery thread around the needle. I like to do 3 times. So see, I'm just doing 1, 2, 3, kind of like 3.5 here. And then I'm holding on to the thread with my finger, and I'm bringing my needle back down really pretty much right in the same spot where the thread is coming out. And I am pulling through, and I'm holding on to that loop just so things don't get tangled, and it helps to create a nice little knot in the center when I'm ready to let it go. The next one we're going to do is the Lazy Daisy stitch, so it is petals. So I'm going from back to front again, and we're making a loop and then we're going to secure it. So I'm going right back through again where my origin is, this time from front to back, and I'm going to pull my thread through, but not all the way. The goal here, like I said, is we're making loops with our Lazy Daisy stitch for the petal. So now I'm going to think, how long do I want my petal to be, and bring my needle from back to front, and I want to make sure that I now bring my needle through the loop that I am making. And now I can start to tighten it. And see, now I've caught my petal, I've caught my loop, so it's not going to go any further. I can make it a little tighter if I wanted to. This is a little loose. And then I'm just kind of going right over the other side of my embroidery thread to create a little tack that holds it down in place. So now I can pull it tighter. You'll see the full stitch in just a second. So see, I've got that little notch at the end there, and then I'm going to do some rudimentary sketching skills so you can see how to put it all together. I prefer to freehand it. When I do my bookmark later, I freehand it, but this just gives you a nice visual. So we start in the center. We're always going to start in the same center origin point from back to front. Put my needle back down in that same spot. And remember, I'm not going to pull it all the way tight. I'm going to make a loop. Sorry, my camera is blurry here. It's not so great with close-ups. I'm going to make my loop, make sure my needle goes through my loop. So see, the visualization might help you here a little bit more with the outline. And that's where I want my loop to be. So now I go from the inside of the loop, this thread, see, at the end, and I go just right outside and poke it through from front to back. That way there's a little tack to hold my petal in its shape. And there it is. And then you can continue with your daisy all the way around. You're always going to start in the center of your daisy from back to front. You go right into the same spot, back to front. Put it right back in the center of your flower again. Make your loop, so don't pull it all the way through tight. I messed up here. I got a little enthusiastic and I pulled through too much. So I'm just pulling my loop back out again so that I can fix it. I made a knot. These things happen. I left this in here to show you that these things happen. It's okay. We're learning. We're being patient. See, I got enthusiastic and I went through too many times. We're learning. I've never done the Lazy Daisy before, and this was my first time doing it. So here we go. Try again. From back to front. Back down in the center of our flower, right where we started, to make our loop. Bring my needle at the end of where I want my petal to be, and make sure it goes through that loop. And now I can pull that loop as tight as I would like it to be. And this is where you start to practice your consistency. My consistency was not so great. You'll see later on when I did it for real, they're a little bit better. They're a little more consistent. The next stitch is the chain stitch. It's a series of loops. So again, we start from back and pull through, and front. Again, we're going through the same hole that we have to create a loop, a lot like the Lazy Daisy. And again, not going to pull it all the way tight. And I want to think about how long do I want this little chain to be. I bring my needle from back to front a little bit forward and it goes through the loop. So again, right now we're very similar to the Lazy Daisy, but we are a little smaller. So now I'm going to bring my needle in through the center of that loop, and I've created a new loop in the center of the first loop. And now again, from back to front, in the center of that loop. So see, now I'm creating a series of loops that originate within each other. So right in the center of my second loop, from front to back, and I've created a new loop. There's my loop, and my needle comes back up a little ways forward to create the length of my stitch. And I make sure the needle goes through the loop to hold it down. And again, this is another one you want to practice your consistency. How long are your stitches going to be? Create my next stitch in my next loop. I go back through the center of the third loop. Pull, but not all the way. Hang on to your loop. And now I decide how long do I want my stitch to be, and I bring my needle from back to front through my felt and make sure that the thread will go through the loop. Just hook the loop right over my needle and pull it through. So you can practice your consistency. How long do you want your chain pieces to be? And you just keep going. So you always go through your loop to create a new loop. You remember with this one that your loops originate from within each other. I'm certain there is a more sophisticated way to end this, but because I'm continuing to use my lavender color to end this, I'm just going to pull my thread in when I'm done from front to back, and then you can create a knot on the back or move on to your next stitch. My next stitch is the stem stitch. Again, we're doing loops, so I'm going from back to front. I'm creating a pretty long stitch here to create a really nice long loop. Now I want to poke my needle from back to front about halfway through that loop, and I'm going to pull through. So see here, it looks like it's on your right side. So we're going to follow that trend. So now I'm going to poke my stitch through, not as long as the first time, and I've created a loop. Again, I want to bring my needle up. Now I'm going through where the first one has ended, so you can see there, see where that purple stitch ends. That's where I'm bringing my needle up and making sure I go through the right side of my loop. So it creates this twisted look. You always want to make sure that you're bringing your needle up on the same side. So again, how long do I want my stitch to be? Here we go from front to back to create my loop, and I'm going to bring my needle up right through the hole of where that second purple stitch ends, and make sure that I'm going, again, on the camera here, it's to the right. Always the same way. If you do one to the left, one to the right, it's not going to be a consistent little twist. Right, so from front to back to create our loop, and bring my needle up right at that hole where that third stitch ends, and make sure I bring my needle to the right of my loop. It's just a nice little twisted stem stitch. Okay, so I've gotten to the top of my A, and remember, you have to think about these all as individual lines, not one big shape. So now that I'm doing this stem stitch on my letter, I'm kind of starting all over again. I'm not trying to continue in a shape. I'm just starting again, so I'm pulling up from the top. Gonna make my long stitch so I can come up halfway through. It's as if I've started a new line and I'm not just trying to continue to the shape of the A. If you think of it that way, it might be a little easier to conceptualize how to continue with your stitches as you're making your shape or your letter or what have you. Just so that you're not trying to figure out, well, now how do I round the corner of my letter or my shape? You're really not. You're just making a new line.
To put this all together, we're going to do something called the blanket stitch. To hold my felt to my poster board, I'm using a binder clip. Librarians love binder clips. This is the same as if I was using pins to hold fabric together while I'm sewing. You use a paper clip, a binder clip, what have you. So to do the blanket stitch, first we're going to put our needle in between the felt and the poster board so that we can hide our knot right in between the two layers. I pre-poked a little hole in this one just to make sure I was testing this out correctly, but I'm bringing my needle from back to front, this time through both layers. So I'm starting from the back of the poster board and going through my felt to the front and pulling it through, but as you guessed it, like most of our stitches here today, not all the way. I want a little loop at the top. And I always try to use my fingers to guide this. Several times I accidentally made little tangles and knots, so I like to use my extra fingers here to guide my thread. So I'm leaving a loop at the top here. And I'm going to put my needle through the loop to secure it. And now you'll see I have something that goes over the top of my poster board and felt and joins them together. So now I can pull my loop tight. All right, and again, back to front, you can see it's kind of hard to poke through the poster board, so I really just pushed with my fingers. This is where you use the thimble that I mentioned in the beginning, or you push down on your counter. So back to front, we're going through both layers to join them. I'm using my fingers to guide my thread to make sure it does not tangle, creating my loop and bringing my needle through the loop to tighten. And now what the loop has done is it's created this little join, this little track in between the two stitches. It's a really nice finishing stitch. It just makes everything look so nice, and I like that I used a different color thread. It becomes a really nice embellishment. So again, you figure out how long you want your stitches to be, the space in between, practice your consistency, bring your needle from back to front, guide your thread, have yourself a little loop here, and bring your needle through your loop, right? So we're still in the front here when we're bringing our needle through the loop. And we pull it through. And again, I have this nice piece of thread that goes over the top. Because my materials are different, it's not a seamless join, but when you have two pieces of fabric, it really becomes this great line that hides the join of your fabric. It looks very, very nice. Okay, so again, back to front, leave a loop, and when your needle is here in the front, you're going to bring it from the front back through your loop to create your join. There are sophisticated ways to do the corners. I did not do that. There are sophisticated ways to end it. I did not do that either. What I did was I made a little knot kind of in the middle of the two pieces. That way I could tuck it in between the felt and the poster board and hide it pretty neatly. I'm sure there are more sophisticated ways to do this, but this is for beginners. No big deal. And so that's it. Your bookmark is done. I love my bookmark. I did lazy daisies. I did French knots. I put French knots in the center of my lazy daisies. And I did a stem stitch on my A. So now here we go. I can use it in the corner in the page of my favorite book, and the poster board keeps everything all nice and stiffened together, doesn't damage our pages, and it sure looks cute. Enjoy!